Meanwhile, Dr. Anthony Fauci sparking some controversy over the weekend after saying he thinks that schools now should remain open. Listen.
Position should be to try as best as possible within reason to keep the children in school or to get them back to school. If you look at the data, the spread among children and from children is not really very big at all.
But of course, that's some months after media headlines like this on your screen about the dangers of school reopenings based on recommendations from health officials like Dr. Anthony Fauci. Joining us now to discuss is Joe Borelli. He's a city councilman from New York, one of the states most impacted by the lockdown restrictions. Joe, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. What your reaction, if you will, just to Dr. Fauci now saying that keeping schools open is now okay?
Well, I'm glad he's come around to that position. I mean, it has been the position in the broader scientific community and amongst almost every medical journal that's published on it since about June. In fact, most of the health departments of foreign governments, even the health departments of many states, have agreed that opening schools is not truly a danger. It's not something that outpaces coronavirus infections in the broader communities in which they're housed. And I'm glad that Dr. Fauci has made this position very public. And I'm even glad to hear yesterday Mayor de Blasio announced that New York City schools will begin to reopen in earnest, meaning we're going to move towards 5-day a week for school kids. So, it's late, better late than never, though, and I'm glad we're moving in this direction.
Councilman, I know that you do not speak for the mayor's office there in New York City, but I do want to ask your opinion on why you think that de Blasio reversed his course and changed that in opening the schools back up when he shut them down last week.
Well, look, we had a lawsuit filed in federal court and in state court as well, and we were due for a hearing on December 3rd. And at that hearing, the DOE, the Department of Education, was going to have to show why they closed school. And unfortunately, the science is with us, and the state law, the New York State Constitution, actually guarantees that children are allowed to be educated in public schools. So when the science and the law are on your side, I think it's time for the defense, in this case, the city, to reverse course. And I also think he was influenced by just the overwhelming, compelling data that schools have not led to spreads. We have a very robust contact tracing core in New York City, and the DOE testified under oath at a hearing that they have found no major links to children spreading COVID in their school buildings. When there is an outbreak in a school, by all means, shut the school down temporarily, clean it, separate the kids. That's great. But having a blanket school closure is not good for children, and it's not good for anyone.
Now, Joe, the Dr. Anthony Fauci has also spoke, even though he said we want to open the schools, keep them open, but he was very adamant about keeping bars closed. If you go beyond that, that is keeping small business owners away from making a living, this kind of a domino effect. Where do you stand with that?
Look, I mean, it's very painful to see. Right now in Staten Island, we're in a zone that's being shut down. And you are seeing a lot of business owners at their breaking point, and they have nothing left to lose. And many of them are beginning to just reopen on their own. If you walk around Staten Island today, you'll see everyone's going to have a fresh haircut. Women aren't going to be showing their roots. Some restaurants are going to be still doing takeout and stuff like that. But ultimately, people are really sick and tired of these lockdowns. It's not March. It's not April. We have ways to treat coronavirus, and we can't just end things with the knee-jerk reaction to lockdown.
I know you're from New York, so I want to ask you about this. There are some House races many may be surprised about that have yet to be called in your state. I believe 7 out of 11 have still to be called, saying they're still tallying votes. What actually is going on? What have you heard? Because it's my understanding this should have already been done.
Well, look, New York is always delayed because of our state laws. We're not permitted to begin recounting until a period of time has passed since Election Day. We're one of those states that counts absentee ballots when they're postmarked. So it's more about just the influx of more absentee ballots this year than in years past and the time it takes to do that. But by the way, I mean, challenging election results is not just a Republican thing. Here in New York, some of those races are really being challenged by Democrats who have hired legal teams, and they're going signature by signature and ballot by ballot to make sure every vote's counted. And by the way, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, whether it's President Trump or whether it's a congressional candidate here who's a Democrat, that's what should happen.
I'm glad you made that point because President Trump gets so much criticism for going forward and challenging this. And naturally, anything the man does, it's going to be in the media, no matter what. But what do you make of that, of this pushback on the president? They're challenging his election. You also see it from the other side as well, but it's not going to garner the headlines like the president does.
No, and to be frank, I mean, I'm glad the president is beginning in earnest, to use Joe Biden's term, the transition process. But he's entitled to exercise his full legal authority to have his day in court. Again, going back to New York, we had a primary in June, a Democratic primary, and many of those races weren't decided for 6 weeks. And that was 6 weeks in which Democrats filed lawsuits and challenges against other Democrats. And we had some upsets of some members of Congress, like Eliot Engel, who lost after being there for nearly 40 years, and some incumbents actually won, Carolyn Maloney. But that's after every candidate had their opportunity to present the evidence to a court, and a judgment was made.
All right, we're all becoming election officials at this point, I believe, this year, among so many other things. Joe Borelli, good to see you. Yeah, thanks, man. Good to see you, Joe.
Newsmax TV is now America's fastest growing cable news channel. We give you the real news you need. So subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up. If you like this video, share it with your friends. Newsmax TV streams live on YouTube for free. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.